All right. Good evening, morning, guys, wherever you're watching from. So, my name is Hafiz. I am currently an IELTS tutor. So, today I will be going a couple of pointers. In general, I'm going to talk a little bit about IELTS academics and the general training. So, this will be an overview session for everyone that still has uncertainty or still a little bit confused about which test to take. And hopefully today I will also be able to cover a little bit about the essence, right? The fundamental skills and knowledge that you will need to be aware of before you actually take the test. Because when it comes to taking the IELTS test, it is very important that you are fully aware of the requirements that you need to get a high score, right? And this is also almost like a reflection for yourself because everybody start at a different level, right? Everyone will have different starting points. So when you take a look at the requirements, the skills, the knowledge that you need, you have to go, right? Okay, what do I know at this point? What don't I know, right? And then start planning according to that perception. So be always mindful that you don't start at the same place as other people, right? And what's important is that everything that I'm going to be covering here, right, is also provided fully in this channel. Like in this channel, the HZ Education, there are a lot of videos that cover IELTS topics, tips and tricks, etc. And you can also check in the description in regards to the kind of programs, trainings that you are able to take, right, where you can kind of study at your own pace. And there's also a money back guarantee, right? We'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. Okay, so now let's get a little bit into the content. So when it comes to the IELTS exam, right, there's the academics version and there's the general training version. You have to be very careful of which test you take because those two, while very similar in terms of format, questions, approach, etc., right? They have completely different purposes. So here I have a table that helps you guys kind of see just what differences there are between the two tests, right? So first, right, of course, we take a look at the purpose for an IELTS academic, just like its title, right? This is academic focus, right? You can imagine when you are in university, when you're in college, the English level that you're going to be expected to use, that is the IELTS level, right? So this test, when you take it, it will be a reflection of that ability, right? Of how well you can use English in an academic environment, right? So when you write papers, when you do assignments, right? So this test is for that. So when you have an intention to go abroad, to go to international universities in Europe, America, and even in Asia, right? The IELTS academics test is widely acceptable, right? And we'll talk a little bit about the standards of the score, etc., a little bit later on, right? As for IELTS general training, this is more specific towards immigration, work, sorry, and training programs. So if you're in a different country, right, you're an immigrant, you would like to get work permit, etc. Usually they require IELTS general training certificate, right? So if your intention is to get that, you don't need to take the IELTS academic test. Now, um, a lot of you might be thinking, are they interchangeable? In some places, yes. In some places, you can take an IELTS academic test and use it for immigration and work in some countries, right? But in some countries you cannot. Like for example, in Canada, I believe you do have to have IELTS general training, not IELTS academic, for immigration and work purposes, right? But in some other countries like Australia, they are interchangeable, right? You can take either. Now, why is it crucial to kind of just decide, whether you should take academic or else general training? Well, number one, they have different difficulties, right? So when it comes to IELTS general training, it's usually relatively easier than the academic standard. Now, do note that academics, again, is mainly the test that they will try and gauge your English ability. In retrospect to when you are in college, university, like you can imagine if you go to Oxford, right? The level of English ability that you have to prove in yourself before getting accepted is quite high. So it's very important that you do take the IELTS academic, in those regards. But since that kind of speaks for itself as well, like when you take an IELTS academics and you get a high score, your English ability is already like non-questionable, right? So when it comes to immigration work, by showing your IELTS academics, right, you kind of already done that, right? You already proven that. Yeah, my English ability is really good. Right? I take IELTS academic, I got a 7, 8, or 9, etc. Right? But if your intention is purely just for immigration work, like you're not thinking about going to university at all, not thinking about having research, etc. It's much better to take just the IELTS general training. Right? You have no intention to kind of use the academics version, certificate, etc. Right? You just want to focus on general training, then take the general training because that's all you'll need to focus on in terms of preparation, etc. But if you have like a wider plan, a bigger plan in the years to come, right? It's more likely that you'll probably need IELTS academic because with IELTS academic, the application of the certificate is more wide, right? It's like you're opening a lot more doors when it comes to the IELTS academic certificate. Right, that's the purpose, right? We're gonna try to cover all aspects of the academics and general training tests, right? So the second one is the listening section. So as you guys already know, probably that all English testing system almost always have four sections: listening, reading, speaking, and writing. Even TOEFL IBT, TOEFL ITP, they all have the same structure, right? With IELTS, they have a slightly different approach though, but they still have those four sections. So let's take a look at what the differences are when it comes to the academic version and the general training version, right? So in the listening section, for example, of course, you will be given academic context, lectures, and discussions. Now, in this session, I will be mainly only covering the general points, right? Now, with this type of video, hopefully, will be conducted almost every day, right? So from Monday to Friday, and every lesson I will try to cover a specific section and show you guys in depth, the kind of techniques, approach, skills, knowledge that you guys can learn and apply in different types of questions, etc. Right? So do kind of look forward to those. So here we're just gonna focus on the general points. So you guys who are watching are a lot more aware on what you need in order to prepare for this test, make the right decision, and then start your preparation. Okay, so the listening section for the IELTS academic, of course, you will be given academic context, right? So there will be talks about let's say the explanation of certain theories or processes, maps, etc. Right? So, but it will be presented as well in an academic context. While IELTS general training, on the other hand, you will be given more, sorry, that social and workplace context, right? So with conversation and monologues. Now, the format of the question itself are not is not different, right? So they both have the same format, usually the same types of question as well, like fill in the blanks, choose the right letter, the right answer option, etc., etc. Right? It's just the audio that's going to be different, right? So, of course, when it comes to IELTS general training, you can expect it to be just slightly easier when it comes to the vocabulary, the speed, etc. Right? Not guaranteed to be a lot easier, but definitely expect it to be slightly easier than IELTS academic. All right, so next section is the reading section. Now, of course, in IELTS Academic, you will get academic context yet again, right? It will be from journals, from papers, research, etc. You will be given articles about, let's say, how a volcano is formed, the science behind astronomy, finding planets, etc., etc. Right? It will contain a lot of high-level vocabularies, complex, structured paragraphs, etc., etc. So, reading academic level, that's what you're going to expect in the reading section, right? And we'll talk a little bit about like, oh, when it comes to high-level vocabulary, what does that mean? Right? Does that mean I have to learn a lot of science? Does that mean I have to learn a lot of sociology, etc.? Right? We'll talk about that in a bit. When it comes to the IELTS general training, right, you are going to mainly talk about the general interest context, right, with texts from newspapers, magazines, etc. So again, the substance is easier than the academic, right? But the approach is relatively the same. You get the same types of questions. You will be taught the same, almost like the tips and tricks as well in order to get the answer, right? That's the reading section. Now, the writing section is where we start to see like a little bit more significant difference, right? So for academics, you will be writing a report or essay based on a graph or a chart. That's basically the first section, right? So in IELTS writing, there are always two sections for both IELTS academics and general training, right? And for the IELTS general training, you will usually write a letter, formal and informal, right, based on the situation. We will take a look at some sample questions, hopefully in some of the sessions, right? But basically, when it comes to the IELTS academic, the writing will be 100% formal, regardless of the type of question, right? So in task one, you basically have a summary question. You have to summarize certain charts, graph, illustrations, maps, etc. Right? But you do have to write it in a very formal manner. While in IELTS general training, there's also one section where you might have to write an informal letter. Right, so you'll kind of have a different tone to how you write your answer with that question. Right, with IELTS academics, there's no non-negotiable. You will have to focus on academic level writing. Right, with IELTS general training, there will be some informal writing. Right. Okay, so that's the writing section, and the speaking section. Now, it's not purely discussing academic topics, right? But you will kind of have a lot of formal topics introduced to you, right? There are about three sections as well. So you will have easy topics, like really casual conversation topics, asking you about maybe what's your hobby, etc. But then it gets more difficult, right, with IELTS academic, right, and to the point where you might need to have a discussion. And there's also one section where you have to kind of prepare your answer on the spot, as in like you're gonna give in a list of questions and then you'll have to prepare. We'll take a look at the specific on how that question looks like later on, right? And then with our general training, you'll basically have just everyday topics basically. And when we talk about the test duration, right? Again, not much difference. It's exactly the same, right? 2 hours 45 minutes, and test format the same, test scoring the same, test difficulty as you can see. Academics is more difficult. It will require a lot more preparation, right? As for the general training, it's slightly easier. So you can kind of expect less preparation. Now, the thing is, as I mentioned in the beginning, right? If you are looking for more opportunities down the line, and remember, these tests will only be accepted for 2 years. So once you've taken the test, you get your score, you get your certificate, you will only be able to use it for 2 years. After that, it has to be renewed, right? So within that 2 years, if you're gonna be, looking for more opportunities, to kind of proven your English, like go to places saying like, hey, I have a IELTS 7, 8, right? You have to go for the IELTS academic test, right? But if you're simply gonna use it like a one-time thing, and non-academic related, it's more recommended that you take the general training. All right. Okay. And so here we have the target audience as well, students seeking higher education or profession. So if you are looking to get accepted to a university in Europe, in America, IELTS academic is the only way to go, right? For general training, you won't be accepted for that, right? But if you're seeking immigration, work, or training opportunities, general training is the way to go, okay? And the test taker's goal, almost similar. So same thing as I said in the beginning, academic is English proficiency is for the IELTS academic, everyday English proficiency is for the IELTS general training. Okay, so that's pretty much the summary of the differences. So hopefully that kind of clears up if anyone is still confused about like which test to take, and you're not quite sure which test to prepare for, right? Take a look at the differences again, right, and kind of reflect upon the purpose first and foremost. Again, if you want to go abroad, study, take the IELTS academic. If you want to work, general training is usually enough. But if you want to be safe, like well, I want to use it for work, but I might go to university or take a master's degree one day, then take the academics. What's very crucial is the preparation, obviously. So, like I said, IELTS certificates only last two years. Not only that, it's quite expensive, right? So I think it's like close to $300 at the moment. So you have to be ambitious, right? Whenever, if you are planning to take any of these tests, be ambitious, strive, and get a 9 or an 8, right? It's okay, if you fall slightly lower, but you got to push for the highest score you can possibly get, right? Now, as I've mentioned in the beginning, right, at HZ Education, there are a lot of tips there are a lot of tips, there are a lot of videos that also kind of show you guys, the tricks and sample questions, etc. You guys can also check the link in the description, right, to kind of just see the kind of training that the education provides. Because one of the best thing about HSAD education is that when you purchase a program like let's say a set of training, it's self-paced. You guys can learn it at your own pace, and I did emphasize this in the beginning. Everybody learns at different pace. Don't look to the person next to you. You learn what you feel is the best, for your own ability. Because let's face it, sometimes you want to force to go fast, but your ability doesn't allow it. Sometimes you want to go slow when you should all be speeding up, right? With HSAT education courses, you get to do that. You get to control your own pace, right? And make sure that you reach your goal, because the courses there are also money back guarantee. So if you fail to reach your target, right, money back guarantee, no question asked. All right, let's continue on with the topic today, right? So in addition to knowing the differences, you guys need to also be aware of the skills. Like as you can see, IELTS academic and general training, in terms of approach, in terms of format, there aren't really that many differences. That includes the knowledge and skills, right? Of course, the requirement for academic will be slightly higher. Well, I've mentioned that a couple of times. Okay, so let's take a look at the fundamental skills and knowledge for academic IELTS and general training IELTS. So basically, they both pretty much have the same thing that you guys need to kind of just take in and prepare by yourself with a tutor, or through the one of the courses at HZ Education, right? So let's take a look at this one by one, right? So first things first, when it comes to the listening section, right? You guys can expect a wide range of English accents. Now, of course, most of the time, if you're lucky, you'll get a clear American accent that's pretty standard, right? But you might occasionally also get Australian accent. So one of the things that, especially people who just started learning English, it's like they are not that used to accents that might be too thick, right? So one of the skills that you need to kind of try and harness, just adapt to, is familiarizing yourself with how certain accent speaks. Because when it comes to the intonation of how they say certain words, right, how they express certain things, it might help you identify answers, right, or understand like what answers are being asked in certain questions, right? So Yeah, that's one fundamental skill that you guys need to be aware of, right? The accent, and as I've mentioned with the academic listening part, the listening section does get more difficult and get faster occasionally, right? So not only do you have to get used to the accent, but you also need to get used to the speed, right? You need to make sure that you're not simply just listening, because the second skill that you need to kind of be familiarize and prepare for is identifying main ideas or specific information, right? Because when you're listening, there are a couple of things that you're focusing on in IELTS, whether you're doing academics or general training. And that is basically, those things are, the first is the question, right? You will need to focus also on the question. You will be given time to look at the questions when you're doing the listening section, right? And then you have to really take a look, very careful look at what the question is asking for, right? And then after that, you will listen for the answer. So you have to keep in mind what the question is asking and try to pick out the answer from the listening audio. So when you listen, you are not only absorbing information, but you are also going, all right, I need to find this kind of specific information, right? So this adaptation isn't easy, right? You have to be exposed to a lot of audios. You have to listen to different types of audios. You have to kind of like try to see if you can summarize the audios as well, etc., etc. Right? So again, everyone has different levels, but that's the main gist of it, right? So you have to be able to read the question, identify what you're looking for, listen to the audio, understand the audio, and pick out the answer that you need. Because when you listen to the audio, you will hear things that you don't need as well, right? You only need the answer. So identifying main ideas, specific information, etc. Right? And one of the tools that you can use in order to achieve that is also effective note-taking skills, right? There will be some people who rely heavily on their memory, but note taking skills, I guarantee you, it's actually very, very valuable, right? So if you are being trained on how to take notes more efficiently, right, that will help you 100%, right? Like when you take the test, you are in an environment that is quite serious, sometimes tense, and if you are sensitive to AC, it is also it can feels a little bit shivery, right? So you're a little bit cold. It's very difficult to concentrate. So note taking skills will help you just remind yourself, hey, this is what the audio was talking about, and remember the audio will not be stopped, right? There are four section in the listening audio in the listening section, um, and the audio will not stop for each question. They will stop at the end of each section, and then you will be given time to just reflect upon each question and make sure that you've put in the right answer, right? So if you don't take notes, you will easily forget, right? So note taking skills, you should not underestimate. Okay. And then ability to predict the direction of the conversation or the lecture, right? This one isn't too essential, right? The important thing is just understanding and being able to follow the conversation, because what happens is focus, right? um, Not everyone has a great level of focus. So if you're the type of person who easily lose tracks, like because the audio is like 2 minutes long, 4 minutes long, and at some point you go like, oh god, I forgot what was just said. Did I just miss the answer? And while you're thinking of that, the audio continues playing and you kind of miss a lot more, right? So it's quite crucial to not predict, but to make sure that you are fully focused and can follow the audio through and through, right, without losing track of where you are, right? Especially since in IELTS listening, the questions, they're usually chronological, right? So first question, of course, you will hear the answer first. Second question, the second. Third question, the third, and so on and so forth, right? So following the audio is really crucial. Okay. And then ability to distinguish between similar sounding words and identify keywords and phrases. Right? So those are more towards like making sure that you are picking out the right word. Like so in IELTS, and this is going to be a recurring theme. Paraphrasing is one of the most common thing you will see in IELTS tests, right? So making sure that you are familiar when the question uses word A, but in the audio they uses word B, but they still mean the same thing, right? So it's pretty crucial that you can identify that immediately because if you don't, you will miss the answer, right? And they IELTS do this a lot, very frequently, because it's one of the easiest traps that anyone can get into. Right? You saw the question, you see that the word that they use, to kind of ask the question is A, but then in the audio you don't hear that at all. Like you don't hear it when in fact what they did was they use a synonym. They paraphrase the entire question or expression, right? So it's very crucial to do that. So with general IELTS training, it's more or less the same, right? Now, good time management skill, you don't really need that in listening. You have to just make sure that you answer all the questions. Do not leave anything blank, right? We'll get to some tips and tricks in some of the sessions, hopefully, but that's basically just the gist of it, right? Now, for reading, right? In the reading section, so you have to be able to analyze, comprehend complex academic tests. Not so much so comprehend 100%, right? Because as I mentioned, you will be given reading passages based on academics tests that might be about geology, biology, astronomy, right? Things that, let's say you're maybe a PE teacher, right? Or maybe you are an art major, you graduate from art major, but then you get the reading passage about how the planet was formed, right? It's not something that IELTS will go, right? Okay, we expect you to actually know about this knowledge. No, that's not it, right? It's more towards about like can you actually understand what they have explained based on the sentences, the words that they have provided you in that text, because everything you need to know in order to answer all questions in the reading passage for both academic and general training are going to be given in that passage, right? So the crucial thing is to just make sure that you can kind of comprehend what the questions are looking for, right? And one of the things that you will see in future sessions when we discuss more about reading section is that the question the questions are actually more crucial than the reading passage itself. Well, I'll explain a little bit in depth what that means, right? But basically, you have to understand fully the question first before you get anything out of the reading passage, right? So we'll talk a little bit more of that in detail. Now, the second skill that you'll need is understanding of vocabulary in academic context, right? Or in general context for that matter. So vocabulary is actually of course, an essential part of English, right? So you will need to make sure that you have enough dictions, yeah, from the top of your head. But for reading, you just have to make sure that you're very familiar with a lot of words, right? Like I said, IELTS is not expecting you to be very knowledgeable about the topic, but they do expect you to understand the vocabulary they use. Right? If they give you a scientific terminology, right, whatever the topic is, it's highly likely that you either don't need to know what that means if you are 100% sure it's a scientific terminology, or they will kind of give away the definition at some point of in the passage, right? So a lot of the vocabulary that they will test you on, they expect you to know, and a lot of them are definitely like academic vocabulary level or general context vocabulary level, right? So like day-to-day vocabulary, etc. Okay, so make sure that before you take any of these tests, you have very high confidence with the amount of vocabulary you have. right? Okay, next is understanding of complex sentences, structures, and ability to identify cohesive devices. So in this regard, right, you all you have to make sure is just kind of like the phrases that you're looking for, the sentences that you're looking for based on the questions, right? Because relying on vocabulary might not be enough. You have to make sure that you understand how the vocabulary is used in context, right? And then it is reflective. Like if you find, let's say, vocabulary A written in the question, right, and then you want to try to find that in the reading passage, right? You have to make sure that they have the same essence, right? They have the same essence basically. Right. The next thing is that knowledge of different types of text structures and genres in academic context. So this is definitely going to be useful for questions like main topics. All right. It's not a common question, but it does pop up every now and then. So when you get a reading academic passage, you have to make sure that you actually know what the main topic is. Sometimes they will ask you the main topic of the reading passage in its entirety. Sometimes you will be asked about the main topic per paragraph, basically, right? So when that happens, you have to make sure that you actually understand what is the gist of every paragraph, and you can kind of identify. Sometimes they will ask you to kind of write it down. Sometimes they will give you the options. Right? It'll be like a multiple choice questions, right? Able to infer meaning from context and identified implied information. So this is like not a lot of difference to making sure that you have a good understanding of vocabulary, sentence structure. If it's being paraphrased, is even if it's paraphrased, you can see that it still has the same meaning, etc. Right? Because questions that ask you for inferring information, that gets that pops up a couple like not too frequently, but I would say more frequently than the main topic question, right? So what does it mean by this statement? What does the author mean by this, etc. So a lot of English tests usually love that type of question as well. And good time management skill, right? And this is going to be also a recurring theme, right? Especially for reading and writing, specifically for reading and writing. Because in reading, right, personally, from my experience, reading is actually um, the section that will allow you to have the highest score probability. So one of the reason being is that you get to check your answer, right? And again, right, if we if you watch the video down the line, in future session, we'll discuss this a little bit more in detail. There is a way to check your answer, right? So with reading, there you can cross-reference it. You can make 100% sure whether your answers are correct or not, right? You can check it. So time management is essential because you'll need that time to check, right? So you'll need good time management skills to make sure that you answer all the questions, right? Of course, according to your capability, and then in the end, you leave some time to check your answers. Okay, and then with writing, right? Ability to produce well-organized, coherent, cohesive essays, reports on academic topics. So the academic topics in question, and this one is first summarizing a very formal information, like in the form of chart, graph, illustrations, etc. Right? So you have to kind of summarize it and present it in a formal way, right? As for the general training, it's more about a problem, right? And in the form of a letter, as I've mentioned in the beginning, it can be informal or formal, right? We'll talk about that in future sessions as well. So um, the ability to write essays, for me personally, is the one that usually takes the longest to build, right? But lucky for you, right, there are templates. So again, please feel free to check the description below to kind of just see the courses that HZAD education offer, and they have a lot of templates, right? One of the thing when it comes to template is that yes, you can easily copy and paste, but right, but it's a huge but. You have to make sure that you actually understand how to use the template because it's not a simple fill in the blanks when it comes to the templates. You have to make sure that the blanks part also cohesively makes sense when you put it in, right? Grammatically, in terms of the lexicon, you also need to make sure that they're all, like quite good. They are very cohesive, connects together, makes sense, etc. Right? Basically, fulfill all the checklists in the grading rubric that IELTS use to grade your essay. Okay. Understanding academic writing conventions and the ability to analyze and interpret visual data. Yes, this is very crucial, especially in task one for academics IELTS, because that's something that you have to make sure in order to get all the information that you need to put into the summary, right? You don't have that with general training, right? So with general training, it's presented, uh, much more simpler. So in academic writing, it's a lot more challenging because some data can be quite complicated. You might get a pie chart, you might get a bar graph, right? But the crucial thing here in terms of ability is that you can actually read them. Right? You can actually read them. You can identify the information that IELTS expect you to highlight, right? Not the information that you think is important. You have to know the information that IELTS thinks is important, basically, like that, right? Knowledge of key features and language of different text types, argumentative, descriptive, comparative. So that will be very essential, crucial in IELTS writing task 2 for academics, right? So that one is going to be a long journey. So I'm not going to discuss too much about it, but for that essay, it's basically like, can you make an argumentative writing? Right? There will be questions about how many paragraphs you need, about the kind of vocabulary you need to use, etc., etc. Right? That will be covered in future session, I promise. Right? Ability to use a wide range of vocabulary. So again, this is a recurring theme, right? Vocabulary is crucial, of course, for any English test, and especially in writing. One of the things that IELTS hate the most is repetition, right? Like when you are so used to using the same conjunction, the same transitive verb, the same expression, the same noun, same adjectives. Yeah, they don't like that. If they see you repeating too many times certain words, right? Especially if they see it like in the same sentence or in the same paragraph, right? You won't get high. Your score won't get, yeah, as high as you want it to. Okay, so wide range of vocabulary is crucial. Effective time management, absolutely, because you don't want to dwell too long on any of the essays, right? For task one, you usually get 20 minutes. For task two, you get 40 minutes, right? So 1 hour total. And you have to make sure that you complete all, right? You fulfill all the criteria, answer the question, right? And make sure that you have time to check at the end. So time management is very essential. Okay. All right. Now, when it comes to speaking, right? First things first, ability to discuss and explain, right? Either complex academic topics or everyday topics, right? And this is pretty standard, right? Now, for speaking IELTS academic, you're not going to really speak about academic topic. It's more likely you're going to be given everyday topics. You might given something that's slightly formal, like you'll get maybe ask a question about, let's say, organization, community, etc. But sometimes you can also get asked about shopping, sentimental items, hobbies, like I said before, preferences, etc. Right? But what I will say is the crucial part is how you answer them, right? So when it comes to speaking, confidence, to intonations, expressions, structure, yeah, they will all be observed, right? But the biggest challenge for that is, do you actually realize what you're saying? A lot of the problems when it comes to speaking is that you don't get a second chance usually. You speak about something, you say something out loud, and then it might take you 20, 30 seconds before you realize, like, oh no, I shouldn't have said this answer, right? Or like, oh wait, did I just say that? That's the wrong grammar. Oh, that's the wrong vocabulary, right? So you'll get simple questions, but giving a simple answer is not as easy as it sounds, right? So again, future sessions, I promise we'll cover that as well. Pronunciation, intonation, accuracy, right? Crucial for both. Yet again, okay, pronunciation and intonation, because you cannot sound like a robot. That's number one. Let's say you get asked, "Oh, what's your favorite color?" My favorite color is blue because blue is very calm, and I feel like blue always associates itself with a lot of calm things. It's like sounding like a robot with no naturality in the voice. It's like picture yourself speaking with a friend, right? Picture yourself speaking with someone that you feel very comfortable with. That's what they're looking for, right? When it comes to the intonation, pronunciation as well is also crucial, right? Pronunciation, of course, being a very essential part of English in general. So you have to make sure that you don't mispronounce word, and if you do, you have to realize that very quickly before you even take the test. Right? Practice a lot of your pronunciation beforehand. Use a wide range of academic vocabulary and grammar structure. You don't really need academic vocabulary. The important thing here is a wide range of vocabulary for both, right? Um, so again, I'll say it repetition, just as I said, right? And one of the things that I'm going to just highlight right now is like you should not do things like and oh I want to do this and do this and then do this and then there's like same conjunction like throughout your entire answer, right? So your vocabulary has to vary. You have to avoid repetition at all, as much as you can, right? And try to use profound meaning words. Again, we'll discuss a little bit more, in future session on what that's like. But profound meaning words basically are like words where you can simply move the word very in order to emphasize the strength. Like for example, if you say I'm very happy, you can kind of try and practice saying I'm elated, something like that, right? Okay, next is ability to convey ideas, opinions clearly and effectively. Right? Again, doesn't have to be in academic context, right? Same thing with general training, right? It's usually more casual context, but nonetheless, right? Conveying ideas very clearly, because one of the things that you should never do when it comes to speaking is stuttering or pausing for too long, right? Maybe, yeah, that's something that you can expect to not be something that IELTS will like, right? So you have to reduce stuttering, you have to reduce pauses, right? So making sure that you can kind of explain your ideas, and sometimes you do get, complex questions that you have never experienced before, right? Like, for example, you get questions about an art, right? You're forced to talk about an art that you have seen, and then you go thinking to yourself, I've never seen an art before. I don't know what to think. I don't know what to say, right? So, can you actually convey an idea that you've actually never experienced before, right? So again, we'll discuss a little bit more about that down the line, right? Understanding of turn taking and discourse markers in academic discussion, right? That's not really something that we're going to focus on, right? Again, the previous points are a lot more essential. And then ability to use appropriate register and tone for academic situations. So, similar to intonation, basically, right? So again, you have to imagine like you're speaking to someone that you're very comfortable with, you're very confident with, right? And it's pretty much the same with the IELTS general training. We will look at the different questions, but you will see when that happens is that they have the same approach, right? That they will have the same approach. So yeah, and that is basically the differences between IELTS academic and general training, right? So I would like just to check if there are actually any questions at the moment, right? Okay, so there isn't actually any questions. Right, so that's completely fine. Right, but if you do have any questions, even after this video has ended in terms of its live stream, like please feel free to leave a comment. Right now, as I've mentioned before, HZ, sorry, uh, education, they have a lot of courses that can help you with with in terms of preparation for the IELTS test, right? So there are tons of video trainings that that they can provide, question samples, tips and tricks, right? And I promise you, tips and tricks are the most valuable thing for IELTS because, right, when it comes to IELTS, there's always a shortcut, as in, like you have, there are certain things that if you know, it makes your life a lot easier in order when you take these tests, right? It can kind of speed up your preparation, etc., right? And the courses in hz education are money back guarantee. You will get your money back if you do not achieve your goal, right? So no questions asked, right? So please feel free to check it out. Check the description at the bottom. Click on the link. Try out one of the courses that they provide, and we will have more sessions like this. And this will basically happen every day from Monday to Friday, with specific trainings. We'll do some questions. I will try and show you guys, all the things that I explained and apply it to real IELTS questions, right? And kind of just try to guide you guys to make sure that you have, everything that you need in order to prepare for IELTS Academy or IELTS General Training. Okay, all right, that's my time, guys. Thank you so much for those who have watched, or if you watch later as well. So again, feel free to comment if you have any question. Thank you so much. I'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye.